Why, Stephen, why? Let's go into the woods. But don't stray too far from the path, or you might find out that the fairy tales you grew up with aren't as safe as you thought. Today we're diving deep into the woods, where it came from, why Stephen Sondheim might be both a genius and a sadist, why this musical cuts straight to the heart, why schools and community theatres can't resist it, how the music itself is built, and the productions that made it legendary. So let's start at the beginning. Into the Woods was born in the mid-1980s, when composer and lyricist Stephen Sondheim teamed up again with writer and director James Lapine. The two had already previously worked together on Sunday in the Park with George, which won the Pulitzer Prize. Their next idea? Take familiar grim fairy tales, like Cinderella, Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood, and Rapunzel, and weave them together with an original couple, the baker and the baker's wife, who have been cursed by a witch and they're desperate for a child. It was a bold mashup, childhood fairy tales crashing into adult consequences. The show premiered in 1986 at the Old Globe Theatre in San Diego. After some rewrites and tightening up, it moved to Broadway in 1987, opening at the Martin Beck Theatre. It was a hit with critics and audiences, and it won 3 Tony Awards for Best Score, Best Book, and Best Actress for Joanna Gleason, who was the baker's wife. And from there, Into the Woods has travelled around the world. It opened in the West End in 1990. There was a darker Broadway revival in 2002. There was the magical production in Regent's Park in the Open Air Theatre in 2010. It was turned into a film by Disney in 2014. And most recently, the 2022 Broadway revival that started as a one-week concert and it became a successful run. So Into the Woods, it's never really gone away. Each revival and adaptation has found new ways to tell the story, sometimes whimsical, sometimes darker, but always reminding us that fairy tales are never as simple as they appear. Now, to talk about Into the Woods, we have to talk about Stephen Sondheim. He's the giant, no pun intended, of 20th century musical theatre. He was a protege of Oscar Hammerstein II, and Sondheim first gained fame writing lyrics for West Side Story and Gypsy. But soon he was composing his own daring musicals. Think Company, Follies, A Little Night Music, Sweeney Todd, and Sunday Night in the Park with George. And then Into the Woods. So, was he a genius or a sadist? Honestly, he was probably both. On the genius side, his lyrics cut to the bone. He trusted audiences to follow complex ideas, layered characters, and sophisticated wordplay. He didn't write fairy tale fluff. He wrote psychology that he's set to music. But if you ask any actors who have sung Sondheim, and they'll tell you he could be a sadist. In Into the Woods, Jack has to leap across octaves in Giants in the Sky. The witch is spitting out tongue twister patter in greens, greens, and nothing but greens. And the baker's wife has conversational rhythms that are constantly fighting against the beat in the music. It's brutally hard. And yet, that difficulty is what makes it truthful. Sondheim once said he wrote the way that people think. It's messy, it's jagged, it's overlapping, and it's never perfectly aligned. And that's why it feels so human. So, genius or sadist? The truth, he was both. He pushed singers and musicians and audiences to their limits. And in doing so, he gave us musicals that still challenge surprise, and devastate us decades later. On the surface, Into the Woods looks like a cheerful fairy tale. Act 1 gives us exactly what we expect. Wishes are made, quests are taken, curses are broken, and weddings are celebrated. Everyone gets their happy ending. But then comes Act 2. Suddenly, the fairy tales unravel. Jack's mother is crushed, Rapunzel dies, the baker's wife has a fleeting moment of happiness, and then she's gone. The princes turn out to be faithless, and a vengeful giant brings destruction. It's brutal, it's unfair, and it feels exactly like life. That's the genius of Sondheim and Lapine. They lure us in with childhood comfort, then ambush us with adult reality. The moral is clear. Be careful what you wish for. Because wishes come true, but not for free. And yet, it's not all despair. Just when the grief feels overwhelming, the show gives us two of the most beautiful songs. No One Is Alone and Children Will Listen. They're lullabies, but they're also lessons. They say, yes, life hurts, people die, choices have consequences, but you're not alone. And what you pass on to children, to friends, to the next generation, it matters. That's why Into the Woods cuts so deep. It's whimsical and witty, but it's also raw, honest, and devastating. And that's why audiences leave the theatre both shattered and comforted at the same time. So why is it so popular with schools and community theatre? Well, you might think that with all its complexity, Into the Woods would be too much for schools or community groups. And yet, it's one of the most produced shows in both settings. So why? First, the cast. The show is an ensemble dream. There are meaty roles for leads, but also dozens of smaller parts. You've got your narrators, princes, parents, witches, mysterious men. Directors can spread the spotlight, which is gold for a large student cast or a community company. Secondly, there's the flexibility. Into the Woods works whether you have a full Broadway budget or just a few trees and a curtain. The woods can be lavish and symbolic. The magic can be done with projections or simply suggested. It's a director's playground. Thirdly, you've got the themes, choices, responsibility, growing up. These are perfect for schools because they open big conversations in the rehearsal room and beyond. And finally, you have the music. Yes, it is a challenging score, but it's also very teachable. Learning Into the Woods makes singers sharper, actors more attentive, and ensembles tighter. That's why teachers love it. It stretches young performers, but the rewards are enormous. So while it may look intimidating on paper, Into the Woods has become a rite of passage for students and community actors everywhere. Because at the end of the day, it's a show that lets everyone play a part in the story. So one of the reasons Into the Woods is so powerful is the way the music itself is built. Sondheim doesn't just write songs. He builds a whole web of motifs that mirror the story. And it all begins with two little words, I wish. That phrase is sprinkled across the entire score, that da-da, da-da. It's everywhere, in the bass lines, in the pianos, in the instruments, in the lyrics themselves. Every character starts the show with it. The repetition ties them all together. It shows that they're all part of the same story. They're all wishing. But it also shows how wishes drive the whole story forward, because we wouldn't have the story without the wish. And it also shows how dangerous they can be. Then you've got songs like Your Fault. It's almost like a fugue. Every character is blaming one another. Their lines are overlapping, they're colliding, they're stacking up until the music itself also becomes an argument. Or you've got the song On the Steps of the Palace. Cinderella isn't singing a sweeping ballad. She's thinking out loud. The rhythm trips and stutters. It's mimicking her indecision, as if we're inside her head while she's frozen in time. And of course you've got Jack's Giants in the Sky. Those wild octave leaps capture the excitement, the fear, and the sheer hugeness of his adventure. The music makes you feel exactly what he's feeling. But Sondheim also knows when to stop the chaos. After all the noise and the death and the confusion, we get No One Is Alone and Children Will Listen. The harmonies widen, the rhythms are more stretched, and suddenly there's room to breathe. It's his way of saying, yes, the woods are dark and dangerous, but there's still comfort, still community, still lessons to carry forward. And that balance between sharp wit and quiet humanity is why this score works, and why it stays with you long after the curtain has fallen. So in Into the Woods, the music isn't just accompaniment, it's storytelling itself. Every motif, every rhythm, every harmony, they all have a purpose. And that's what makes it such a masterpiece. So why does Into the Woods endure? Because it gives us everything. You've got the joy of childhood fairy tales, the heartbreak of adult reality, and the comfort of knowing we're not alone in the woods. Sondheim and Lapine built a show that's witty, brutal, and compassionate all at once, and decades later, we're still thriving on this story. From school halls to Broadway to the West End to outdoor theatres and international productions. In fact, the story keeps going. After that smash hit of 2022 on Broadway, Into the Woods is touring across the USA, and productions are lined up worldwide. There's an Australian production opening, there's loads going on, and community groups and schools are continuing to rediscover it every year. And you can bet there will be more revivals in London, in New York, and beyond. Because at the end of the day, we never stop wishing, we never stop searching, and we never stop needing those reminders that no one is alone and our children will listen.